Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to the Big Blue View YouTube channel. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like what you hear and you see. Although I'm not sure you're going to like what you see ever when you're looking at my bald head, but so be it. And a happy schedule release day, Giants fans. Will know the full schedule by later on this evening as we record here on Wednesday, and here to help me talk about the schedule, talk about the latest goings on with his terrific book, Once a Giant, talk about the Giants' 100th anniversary celebration, all that fun stuff is the great Gary Myers, former columnist for the New York Daily News. Gary, welcome back to the show.
Ed, it's always great to be on with you.
Hey, let's do this before we dive deep into the Giants and deep into the schedule and all that stuff. You have a pretty cool event coming up, I think Thursday night around your book. Why don't you just tell people what that is in case they want to go out and meet some Giants legends?
Yeah, in Ridgewood, New Jersey, at Bookends, Thursday night, I'm going to have Harry Carson and Leonard Marshall, two of the great Giants of all time, signing copies of my book, Once a Giant. And we're also going to do, as a bonus, they have a really nice room at Bookends where we're going to do a Q&A. So, I'll start off asking those guys some questions, and then we'll open it up to anybody who's attending to be able to talk and ask questions about Leonard and Harry, about the '86 season, about the Giants' history, about the Giants coming up in 2024. Anything you want to talk about, Harry and Leonard will be there to answer your questions. So this is the third event I'm actually doing at Bookends. I had Phil Simms last September, and we had an overwhelming response. So I had Joe Morris come. I think it was in late October or early November of last year, and we had a great response. And I figured, as a potential Father's Day gift, to have this event, people come out and get this book for, the guy or gal in their life who they think, would enjoy this book. And also, although obviously I'm not affiliated with the Giants, but with all their announcements this week about the 100th season celebration coming up, this is a great opportunity to talk to two of the greatest players in Giants history, and what I consider to be, if not the greatest Giants team of all time, because I can't really judge, the teams from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's at least the Giants' greatest team of the Super Bowl era.
Absolutely. So fun event, access to some Giants greats that you wouldn't otherwise get. So stop out there if you have an opportunity. And Gary,
and one other thing I just want to say, you can go on the Bookends website if you want to pre-order, and then the book will be waiting for you when you come to the event tomorrow night. And then if one really cool thing that the owner does there, if you can't make it to the event, you can still order the book online. He'll get it signed by Harry and Leonard and then ship it to you. So a lot of great opportunities. Or you can just show up tomorrow night and get the book at the store and have it signed.
Nice. Gary, let's talk about the NFL schedule release.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you and I are recording on Wednesday morning, and the little bits and pieces of the schedule have been dripping out throughout the last day or two. And I have to ask you, does this drive you crazy? Here's one game, here's another game. It drives me insane.
Well, what the NFL is doing is just, first they announced a game it's Brazil, right? Is that where the Packers and the Eagles are playing?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, they announced that one a while ago, and then they released the international games, and the Thursday night opener, the Chiefs, hosting the Ravens, and then the Jets game against the 49ers. The Monday night opener came out yesterday. So the league is trying to get maximum exposure on the schedule release when we already know who every team is playing next year. I mean, that was determined the second that the last season ended. But they've turned this into the second biggest off-season event, following the draft. I mean, this is this gets more attention than the combine does because people make their travel plans around the schedule. I'll tell you a funny story. When I worked in Dallas in the 80s, the Cowboys used to have a luncheon to announce their schedule. That was their tradition, and they'd have fans and mainly sponsors there and the media. But it was a big annual event. Well, I decided I didn't want the Cowboys to have all the fun with that, so I wound up finding a great source who got the schedule one day early. And this was the days before the internet. So I'd get the schedule, say like 2 o'clock the day before the league was making the announcement. And I'd write a story and we do a graphic, the game by game with the date and the time. And we'd have it stripped across the top of the Dallas Morning News sports section the morning that the Cowboys were having their luncheon, 3 hours later or 4 hours later, and all the radio stations would be reading it on the air. And then the Cowboys would have the luncheon to announce the schedule, and everybody already knew it because of me. And then I'd get my beat writer friends around the country saying, "Hey, do you think your source can give me the Steelers schedule? Can they give me, the Jets schedule or the Giants schedule?" And I'd say, "Sorry, this was like a one-shot deal. My guy was just giving me the Cowboys schedule." And it used to drive the Cowboys nuts. And then over the years, Ed, more people got into it, and it no longer became like a thrill to me to break that story and tick off the Cowboys because it was being done all over the country. And then when I moved back to New York in '89, I was able to get some of the games for the Daily News, but the Post was doing it, Newsday was doing it, and I kind of lost interest because it was no longer a novel thing. And now, by the time the NFL announces the schedule tonight, most of the games will have already leaked. We know the Giants game in Germany, against the Panthers, and the Jets are playing that Monday night game, and then the game in London. But by the time NFL Network goes on the air with it tonight, there'll be, I guarantee you, a lot more of the Giants games will have leaked by then, and the NFL will just be left with crumbs. Well, and they kind of get what they deserve by doing it this way.
It's there's two things that I can say off that. That's a great story about the Cowboys, and I saw you post that online the other day. I was hoping you would get into that. So that's a great story. And the thing about it, what the NFL has done, the NFL has become the masters of keeping themselves front and center on the calendar almost every single day,
it's amazing,
year round. And the other thing that I wanted to say, you talked about sort of the thrill of the whole thing, the thrill of sort of breaking that story and kind of sticking it to the Cowboys has kind of gone away. And, what I do at Big Blue View, I don't break stories. I don't break scoops. I don't, I have access to the team and all of that. But the journalist in me is bothered by that because I grew up in newspapers. I went to school for journalism. I grew up that way. But here's the thing. In this age of social media, the scoop lasts about 20 seconds. The scoop lasts as soon as you put it online, it's not yours anymore. It's been retweeted a gazillion times. And 5 minutes after you break it, everybody forgets who broke it and nobody cares. So it's just, I don't worry about it. I mean, I don't worry about quote unquote, not breaking stories, as much as I might have in a bygone era.
Well, it's funny you say that, and I think you're 100% right. That, well, first of all, back in the Dallas days, if we had the internet, I could never have held that schedule story for the next day. Back then, I had nowhere to put it. There was no online newspaper or Twitter or anything like that. So you just in those days, you just hope when you had a story that you thought was breaking news that it would hold until the next morning's paper, because if I got a story 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I had no idea whether somebody else was going to get it in the next 10 hours or whatever. So you just kind of had your fingers crossed. Now See, I think what you do, and I think you have the right approach to this, people are more interested in what your reaction is to the news than necessarily you breaking the news. And I'm talking about like you specifically. Now, if I was still at the Daily News, that's still a news breaking business. And although the scoop would last 5 minutes until somebody confirmed it, and then everybody would have it as just it's their own, for what you're doing, people are coming to you and Big Blue View because they want to know what you, Ed Valentine, who's been around the Giants forever, they want to know what your reaction is to it. Not a hot take necessarily, because the business is now infiltrated with uneducated hot takes, but they want to know what you think about it because you're around the team and you have a great perspective on it. So I think taking that approach is of more value to you than kind of wasting your time trying to get a morsel of news that then everybody's going to claim as their own anyway. So the business is totally changed. And my job, and I was just a columnist, not just a columnist, but I wasn't a beat writer at the Daily News. I was the columnist. So it was really up to the beat guy to try to dig out the news. And it was my job to comment on it. But I still tried to break stories because I had really good sources. It's just the business is just really, it's sad to me what's happened to newspapers. Their websites have become more important than the actual paper itself. I can't tell you the last time I walked into a store or Grand Central or whatever and bought a newspaper. I just get it online. And that to me is sad because I'm an old newspaper guy. I used to love to have the paper in my hand and read it, and nobody does that anymore.
It's funny, Gary, as an old newspaper guy myself, and we're off the beaten track here, and there's probably folks out there who don't care, but when I used to go on vacation, and I still have a lot of these in my basement, I used to collect newspapers from wherever we went on vacation. I would collect, the better newspapers in whatever that area happened to be, and because that was cool. I wanted to see how they did things. I wanted to see what their approach was, how they designed, how they laid out their paper and all of that, because that was a thing that I did back in the day. And I still love the feel of a newspaper in my hands, but I'm like you, I haven't bought one in ages.
I'll tell you this. In my attic, I have, I'd say 95% of the stories I wrote in my 8 years in Dallas. I get tear sheets from them and put them in a box, and then, when I started at the Daily News in '89, until the internet became the thing, and I stopped getting the newspaper delivered. I kept all my Daily News stories, and I have boxes and boxes upstairs of something I will probably never look at the rest of my life. And my wife is pleading with me, throw it out, throw it out. I said, I can't throw it out. That's my career up there, And she goes, but you're never going to look at it, and it's a fire hazard or something like that. So it's like it's a part of me, and it's a part of my life, and I'm not a hoarder whatsoever, but that's my life's work in those boxes, and I have a really hard time parting with it. At some point, I'm going to throw it out because it is kind of useless. But we are off the beaten track.
I was just going to say, before we get back on track, I have a trunk full of the same kind of stuff from years and years and years of writing, and the biggest reason I hate looking at it is because I had hair. I had hair back in the day. But hey, we are talking about history, and we are talking about the past, and one of the cool things about the schedule release, and as we discuss this, the one game that we know that the Giants are going to play is in Munich against the Carolina Panthers. And I don't know about you, but I saw that one coming a mile away.
Yeah.
Because the Giants are celebrating their 100th anniversary this year. And not only are the Giants going to take advantage of that in a number of ways, but I think the league is going to try to take advantage of that as well.
Yeah, and I think a few months ago, the Giants got the marketing rights in Germany. You know how they're signing
That's right,
marketing rights in Europe, And I think it was maybe around the league meetings this year that the Giants got assigned Germany. And so you knew they were going to try to, I don't know how many other teams were assigned Germany, but it's only a handful. And so you knew that the Giants, if it wasn't this year, maybe next year, would be scheduled for a game over there. I think the tip off was, and I didn't see this myself, but somebody from the organization told me this, that they sent a camera crew to Germany during the draft. And again, I didn't see what they produced from there, but I assume it was just like fan reaction to what the Giants did in the draft. And now, why else would you do that unless you're trying to, promote that the team is going to be playing there this year? So that was the game that was pretty much a given on their schedule. It was just a question of when it was going to be. I think it's in. Is it in November? Is that?
It's week 10, November 10th. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So you mentioned to me off the air, the Giants are doing a number of really cool activities around the 100th anniversary celebration. One of the things that they're doing is naming their take on the greatest 100 players in Giants history. You mentioned to me that you had the opportunity to be part of that panel. So Gary, you got to spill the top 10. Come on, you got to spill the top 10. I know you can't. I know.
As much as I like you and I'm a fan of your podcast, I mean, seriously,
I know you can't.
Not only did they ask us not to reveal how it came out, but until the Giants announced it the other day, they didn't even want us to say that was an exercise that they were undergoing, that they were going to name a top 100. Now, the Giants made that announcement the other day, and I think I'm not exactly sure how they're going to do the announcement, but I know it's going to be sometime over the summer. And one of the reasons, and we'll see if I'm right about this, that I've always felt that the Giants were going to be opening the season at home was they're going to find some way to celebrate the 100th season. Now, people are going to confuse the 100th season with the 100th anniversary. Giants started in 1925. For the 100th anniversary, technically, is next year, but 2024 is their 100th season. And I think that's how they're promoting it. So I would think there's going to be a lot of events around the opening game of the season, which is why I've always felt that the Giants would be opening at home. And I did predict correctly, I don't know if your viewers even care about this, that the Jets, I thought they'd do over with the Jets on Monday night to give ESPN a chance to have Aaron Rodgers' first game again, because the first one only lasted 4 plays. I thought there was a good chance they were going to do that and let the Jets open at MetLife like they did last year on Monday night, but they decided to put them in San Francisco, which, there's a ton of storylines in that game. We don't need to get into that. But I really thought they'd give the Jets a chance to open at home and do a do-over with Aaron Rodgers. But all they're doing is a do-over for ESPN and giving Aaron Rodgers, which technically, 2.0 on his season opener. But we'll wait and see who the Giants open against. There's very few seasons, and I'd have to go back and look at this, that both teams opened on the road. I can't ever really remember that off the top of my head. Maybe it's happened, but I think there's a real good chance when the schedule gets announced or when it leaks between now and then that we'll find out the Giants are opening at home, and we'll just wait and see. You've heard a couple of names, potential opponents. I have as well. I'm sure we'll know that before the official announcement.
Yeah, it's interesting. Something just flashed across. We talk about breaking news and how quickly stuff happens and all that. Something just flashed across the feed on X. The Giants are going to be featured on Hard Knocks, on the off-season version of Hard Knocks, which that has to be revolving around the 100th the celebration of the 100th, because
Oh,
that's something I
interesting.
never thought I would see. Although that's not the training camp version,
Right.
where they would be interacting with with players and coaches, but that's still interesting news, and that's another development that has to be tied to the
Yeah,
anniversary.
I mean, because we know how much the Giants have resisted being on that, being on Hard Knocks. Um, it's just something they've been opposed to giving NFL Films that kind of access. At some point, it was going to happen, and the criteria. There's all kinds of criteria how you can um, be disqualified or opt out of it. Depending if you've made the playoffs and this and that. So I'm not sure if the Giants qualified and they're forcing them, or maybe they volunteered because of the 100th season. Um, and again, the I think in during this training camp, the access can be really intrusive.
Hmm.
Um,
And this is
Honestly,
this yeah, this is more following, it looks like it was, January to July, so it was through the off season, probably a lot about the draft process and gearing up for the 100th anniversary, which is
but
pretty
then they
cool.
also they do follow them around during the in-season one. Does go game by game.
Right.
I haven't watched it as religiously as I've watched the training camp one, because you kind of forget that it's on during
Hmm.
the season. There's so much NFL programming that you forget that I think it's on HBO as well as the one that they have during the summer. But um, I've watched some episodes of it, and they do get access to the meeting rooms and stuff. I'm not sure that their access to the players on is the same as training camp, but we'll find out. And you know, again, with a training camp one, Hard Knocks, and a regular season Hard Knocks, it was only so long the Giants can avoid it. And
Yeah, you figured they had to cave eventually,
yeah,
and I know that John Mara is also not one who is thrilled about having the Giants play on the various holidays, but it looks like this year's going to be the third consecutive year where the Giants are playing on either Thanksgiving Day or Christmas. So I'm
really,
not sure. I'm not sure who John made mad, but that's 3 years in
yeah.
a row.
Now I haven't heard that one, but
I saw it on. I think it was ESPN that didn't tweet that officially, but put that out there as a
okay.
possibility that the Giants would be on Thanksgiving again, and that makes Thanksgiving in 2022, Christmas last year, and Thanksgiving again this year. So John made somebody mad.
No, John is part of the inner circle. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so
It's
listen,
interesting.
they have well, I think two Christmas games that are apparently going to be on Netflix
On a Wednesday.
on Wednesday, and then there's three Thanksgiving games. So that's 5 games, which means 10 teams, which is a third of the league. And there's probably going to be a Black Friday game again, so that makes 12 teams. So it's a matter of what are your odds of getting picked for one of those games. It's probably pretty high. Now I
Hmm.
think teams can put in a request not to be scheduled on those days, and
Hmm.
um, but that you can only do that so many times. So again, that's what you just mentioned is the first I've heard of that. So we'll see if those reports are correct. But again, we knew the day after the season, or the second the regular season ended, who the Giants' opponents were going to be in 2024. It's just people get so worked up now. And again, this is a testament to the NFL's PR machine, that um, you have all these leaks and this. I think ESPN might even have a show tonight. I know NFL Network does, that the order of the games and who's playing Sunday night, and who's playing Monday night, and who's playing 3 road games in a row. And if you're playing a game in Europe, Do you have the bye next week? And if you don't have the bye, is it because you requested not to have the bye? Because that's a new trend also, is that it used to be a given that if you played in London or some of these other international games now, that you would be off the next week. And that's, some teams are finding that they'd rather just get right back into it. And it used to be when you played in London, you would travel on Monday or Tuesday. And now teams are traveling on Thursday night, getting there Friday morning, trying to get the team acclimated to the time change by not having them go to the hotel and take a nap right away. They're getting them out on the field to run around and try to get them used to the time change. So when they play on Sunday, it feels normal to them. So as there's been more games abroad, teams are finding out, what works best for them as far as their travel plans.
Yeah, that's a whole interesting thing. I suppose the theory, we'll just take the bye week later, just get through it,
Yeah.
and take the bye week at a better time in the season and all of that. But I'm sure a lot of the sports science and sleep studies and all of that, play into all of that. But it is interesting, and that is something that I'm sure will come up with Brian Daboll, is how the Giants are going to handle that. So we'll find out it as the season goes along. Gary, I wanted to ask before I let you go, in reference to the 100th anniversary celebration, to the 100th season, any other activities, anything else on that you're looking forward to in particular?
Yeah, the Giants are having an event at the theater at Madison Square Garden where they're going to have a lot of the big names from their history. I was reading the other day that Parcells and Coughlin are going to be there, along with a bunch of players. And I think the tickets were first open to the season ticket holders and then to the general public. Obviously, the theater there is not as big as the Garden itself, so I'm not sure how many fans it will hold, but the Giants going to make a big deal about that. I think there's going to be, like I said, around the season opener, I think there's going to be some events that the Giants are going to, I'm not exactly sure what they are, and they haven't been announced yet, to the best of my knowledge. They're going to be doing some events that the fans are going to have a chance to participate with, whether it's a fan fest or, things of that nature. We'll find out. But the Giants are really embracing this 100th season, and why not? I mean, that's a pretty big deal,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of, now listen, they're going to be trying to make some money out of this also with T-shirts and hats and things of that nature, and it wouldn't be 2024 if the NFL or one of its teams doesn't try to monetize everything. But I think you'll be seeing. I think there's 3 games this year that they're designating as 100th season celebration games, and so there'll be events, around that, and you'll be seeing a lot of the players from their top 100 at these different events. And I think it's going to, listen, the way I'll tell you a little bit about the process. I'll tell you this real quickly. The way we did it was, I think there were 14 or 15 of us involved in the process, media people and some others. And Bob Papa was the one who ran the voting. So the first thing we did, he says, okay, everybody vote on their 1 through 10. And then, the 14 or 15 people would send in their ballots, and Bob would come up with the 1 through 10 consensus by assigning point values to where, I'm not exactly sure he did it, but just say 10 points for first place vote, 9 points for number 2, et cetera, down to 10. Whoever got the 10 most votes, then he put them in the correct order. And then he let us know, okay, here were others who received votes in the top 10, but didn't make the top 10. Now give us your 11 through 20. And the thing the Giants also did that was very helpful is they supplied us with about 110 biographies, short career achievements of their players. Now, we were not bound to using those 110. We can have write-ins and stuff like that. So then we went and we voted 11 through 20. And we same thing. He then tell us, okay, here's 11 through 20, and here's who also got votes if you wanted to consider them for the next 10. Do what you want with it. And so we did one a week for 10 weeks or so and came up with the top 100. And so I've had the top 100 list probably since October, and I
Right.
haven't told a soul. I mean, people have guessed who number one is, and it's not real
Mhm.
hard to guess.
Mhm.
If you want to guess,
No,
feel free.
I think we know.
Yeah.
I think we know who that is. We don't have to even go there yet.
Yeah, let me ask you this, okay? And I'm not going to tell you who I voted until this comes out because, again, sworn to secrecy. Who would you have voted for, one ahead of the other, between Eli Manning and Phil Simms?
That is so hard. I think I would. I think
And let me ask you a second question to go with this, so you can think of all this through. Where would you have voted them? How high would you have voted each one?
I'm putting Eli ahead of Phil simply because of how long it took Phil to really entrench himself as the guy for the Giants, and simply because of maybe just a couple of the historic throws that Eli made in Super Bowls. So I think for me it's Eli. Um, without really looking at the list,
Yeah, this is a tough question.
I'm putting Eli. Let me say conservatively in the top 15.
Okay.
Conservatively in the top 15, and I'm probably putting Phil in the top 25. And what's really interesting to me as we talk about this, we did this exercise at Big Blue View probably early in the days when I was running this site. So maybe and we started in 2007 with this site. We probably did this top 100 players in the history of the Giants. We probably did this somewhere between 2010 and 2012. And as we're talking, I'm kicking around the idea of doing it again and doing it now just to see how it compares with the list that you
That,
guys actually put out.
that's a great idea.
I think maybe we'll do that again, um, and try to get that put together, before before the official list comes out, just to see how our voters compare to what you guys did.
Yeah, let me ask you this. If Phil had won that second Super Bowl,
Hmm.
right, uh, how much would that have influenced where you put him?
Oh, I think that makes the conversation between him and Eli even harder. I think it's I because you and I have had the Eli Manning Hall of Fame discussion
Mhm.
before, and to me, whether he gets in first ballot or not, to me, Eli Manning is a Hall of Fame quarterback for the simple reason that you put all the numbers aside, you put all of that aside, you put the one loss record aside, because I'm not convinced that the Giants did Eli any favors of the back half of his career. Just
Absolutely.
with it, that's not Eli's fault that the Giants didn't put a good team around him the last 6, 7, 8 years of his career. But Eli's got those 2 rings. He's got incredible plays that he made in those 2 Super Bowls. To me, if Phil Simms had that second Super Bowl and a second Super Bowl MVP, you've also got to put him in the Hall of Fame discussion as well. But he doesn't have that. So that I think is where the difference is.
Yeah, if Phil had won that second Super Bowl, Ed, if he wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer, it would not have taken him more than 5 years.
Hmm.
That second Super Bowl and being injured is what has kept him out. I'm convinced of that. But I'll tell you this, and this is pretty interesting, that I've had this conversation with Phil, I said, man, if you were just a quarterback straight through, you guys would have won the Super Bowl and you'd be in the Hall of Fame. And he's told me not to take it for granted by any means, because he doesn't, that he could have done what Hostetler did. And the reason he says that is that Jeff's mobility was a huge part of the victory in San Francisco in the championship game, as well as the Super Bowl against Buffalo. And Jeff was much more, Hostetler was much more mobile than Phil. And Phil says, I couldn't have done that. He's not saying he wouldn't have won those games, but he says you can't necessarily take it for granted.
And
Yeah,
what I have to say about that, that is not something that I knew about Phil Simms, but that tells you a lot. To me, it tells you a lot about Phil. It tells you a lot
absolutely.
about the humility,
Mhm.
about the recognition of what his teammates did. And that's a great nugget of information.
Phil, I mean, the Giants was spoiled by having Phil and Eli. Now I know there's a gap in between, uh, and just like 49er fans were spoiled going from Montana to Steve Young, two Hall of Fame quarterbacks. The Giants went from two quarterbacks, one won the Super Bowl, and the other, and then Phil helped at least set up the second one because they had a tremendous regular season in 1990, and then having Eli for all those years. And the Giants should have had more success and should have taken better advantage of having Eli. And I agree with you. From the second Super Bowl on, it just seems they stopped making the right personnel decisions around Eli, other than Odell, um, who kind of talked his way off the team and had injuries prior to that. Name a really elite player on the offensive side of the ball that the Giants added to that team from the second Super Bowl on, and they just didn't
Well,
do anything to really help him.
and there's an argument to be made, and I hate to go there because you look at the Parcells Sims era, you look at the Coughlin Eli era, and you got two Super Bowls out of the Coughlin Eli era. But there's an argument to be made that with that combination, that there's an underachievement to
Mhm.
that combination because of what happened with Plaxico in 2008, which was the best team of that era. Bar
Absolutely.
none, to me, it was the best team of that era. And because now the last couple of years of Eli's career, he was kind of hanging on, and the Giants
Mhm.
were trying to give him one last playoff run and all of that. But while Eli was still prime Eli, things started to fall apart around him,
Yeah.
and that was unfortunate. Everybody says, "Oh, how's he Hall of Famer when he's 117 and 117 for his career?" Um, you look at what he did when he was given opportunities in the playoffs, and that that overall regular season record was more about what happened around him than anything else.
Yeah, and I agree. And Eli, and we talked about this the last time I was on with you, Ed. This is Eli's first year of eligibility, and assuming he makes it to the final 15, um, which means that when we get together as a group in January, he will be discussed at length. My argument for Eli will be exactly, and I'll expand on it, but exactly what I said to you last time. What else is a Hall of Famer quarterback if not a guy that won two Super Bowls, was the MVP in each game, and led a game-winning drive in the last 2 minutes, both against Belichick's defense, the first time in a game that prevented the Patriots from being known as the greatest single-season team in NFL history, which prevented them from going 19-0. What else do you want when you're considering the credentials of a Hall of Fame quarterback? And I think I asked you this question last time, and I'm just going to ask it kind of just to throw it out there for your viewers to consider. Do you think that Dan Marino would switch careers with Eli Manning and trade in all his records for 2 Super Bowl MVPs?
Hun-
I say yes.
100%. Absolutely 100%. It's also one of those things, Gary, that I tell frustrated Giants fans who have looked at the last decade and they've been upset, because there hasn't been a lot of good football. There's only been 2 playoff appearances and 1 playoff victory since that last Super Bowl victory. There's a whole lot of fan bases out there in the NFL that would trade places with Giants fans. The Giants fans have four Lombardi trophies sitting in the case at 1925 Giants Drive. So there's a lot of fan bases that would
Yeah.
trade places.
And listen, people who followed me in the Daily News all those years know the last thing I am is a homer. I was tough on the Giants all through the time that when it needed to be, right? I thought it was very objective and fair. But what I tell Giant fans, Ed, is since 1986, when the Giants won their first Super Bowl, obviously everybody knows they won 4. There's only one team since 1986 that's won more Super Bowls than the Giants, and that's the Patriots. So when you put that in perspective, and you're looking at the big picture rather than they stunk last year, and before making the playoffs in 22, they've been terrible since 2016, and the last years of the Coughlin era were bad, and that's all people really want to remember. And I understand that. I mean, I'm a huge Mets fan. And they got to the World Series more recently than the Yankees did. And that's what I tell my Yankee fans, like, oh, which team has gotten to the World Series? And they go, well, okay, but you haven't won a World Series since 1986. And I go, okay, you got me there. But at least I have 2015, which is so much fun for me as a Mets fan. But, since then, it's been terrible for the most part. So I understand Giant fans saying, I don't want to hear about the 4 Super Bowls. The last one was more than 10 years ago. But when you sit back and you evaluate the product as a whole, and you say, all right, we got 4 since 86 and only the Patriots have more. And just think of your Jets friends who haven't been to a Super Bowl since the 68 season and have the longest streak of the 4 major sports of not making the playoffs. I mean, think about that. The Jets have the longest streak of anybody in sports that we follow, baseball, basketball, hockey, and football. No team has been out of the playoffs longer than the Jets. And, so, it's not like misery loves company because you really just focus on your own team. But there are teams the Lions have never been to the Lions are the only team that have been around every year of the Super Bowl era. So we're not counting the Browns in here because the Browns were out of business for 3 years, as we know. The Lions are the only team in the Super Bowl era that has not been to the Super Bowl. And just think of the suffering there. And then last year, they had the 49ers on the road down, I think it was 2 touchdowns or 13 points at the half. They were within 30 minutes of the Super Bowl and blew it because the coach, a former Giant, Dan Campbell, made some horrendous game management decisions. Think about how those fans are suffering because they've had nothing. And Giant fans only have to go back to 2011 to the last Super Bowl. So I understand their misery, but I'm not compassionate about it because when you look at it in the big picture, what other fan bases have gone through, you say, it hasn't been that bad.
No, it most definitely hasn't. Gary, I much appreciate the time and the insight. Your book is still out there. Still, Giants fans, if you haven't picked it up, you probably should. Gary, if you just want to let people know, I'm pretty sure they can probably find it just about anywhere books are sold.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon, you go into Barnes and Noble and any independent bookstore, they're still carrying it. And I'm really excited about this event because I've known Harry Carson since 1978, which was my first year around the Giants, and I've known Leonard, forever, and I've known him for 30 years or whatever. So to be able to do this event tomorrow night at Bookends in Ridgewood, and be able to involve the fans in it, because the Q&A stuff is my favorite part. being able to ask these guys questions and then being open to the fans. So it starts at 6 o'clock at Bookends in Ridgewood. Again, you can order the book online and they'll be waiting for you to have autographed by those guys. If you can't make it, you'll get an autographed copy sent to you if you want to order it, or just show up at the store. And like I mentioned, we had the event with Phil Simms there and Joe Morris, and it was a tremendous turnout both times. I'm hoping that maybe for a change, the weather will be nice around here and it'll stop raining for once, and we'll get a great turnout. And again, it'll be a great Father's Day gift, and to be able to get it signed by those two legends, will make it even more special. And if you want to come out, I'll let you cut the line and maybe even take part in asking some questions with me if you'd like.
There you go, Gary. Appreciate it as always. It's always fascinating. We always manage to detour because we're a couple of old guys talking football, and that's always fun for me. So I appreciate it. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.